great addition in Kansas City or in Philadelphia, but one of those two teams needs to make that happen. Because think about this, Scott. Those are two teams that people are looking at as potential favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. People are still looking at both of those teams as favorites that could win the Super Bowl this year. A lot to do because of their quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, Carson Wentz. And I have to throw this out there too, Scott, because people tend to have a short memory. Everyone is now saying that Carson Wentz is back. Carson Wentz is back. Do people not remember what Carson Wentz was doing in 2017 before he tore his ACL?
Right.
Like seriously. I understand that Nick Foles came in and he did his job and he led that team to a Super Bowl. And he will always go down as a folklore-type character in Philadelphia sports history. Not just Philadelphia Eagles history, Philadelphia sports history. He'll never have to pay for a beer or cheesesteak in that town ever again, even if he is playing on an opposing team. But Carson Wentz looked like in 2017, before tearing his ACL against the LA Rams, what Patrick Mahomes has looked like for the past 2 years. Now, maybe not necessarily with the no-look passes, but you hear the commentators say it so many times, Scott. When he's throwing that long ball and how gracefully it comes out of his hand, you'll hear Joe Buck or some of the other announcers say it looks like he handed that ball off. But the Kansas City Chiefs, I was impressed with their offense. I was really impressed with the fact that Travis Kelce had the awareness that he did on a play that changed that entire game to me.
Yeah.
Because you got to give the Detroit Lions defense some credit. They were without both their starting corners yesterday, and they were making life very hard on those Kansas City Chiefs receivers. So you got to give them credit for that. And to see Travis Kelce go up for a play, and it would have been a caught ball anyway, and he just would have went down, he would have gotten tackled. But he notices that LaShawn McCoy is right there, and he gives them a Harlem Globetrotter-like pass to take it down the field and get some more yardage. So clearly what you saw yesterday is Patrick Mahomes' creativity is rubbing off on everybody else within the organization. And not just Patrick Mahomes, but you got to give credit to Andy Reid as well, because I don't believe Andy gets his just due. I want people to think about this for a second. Andy Reid went to 5 NFC championships and a Super Bowl with Donovan McNabb as his quarterback.
Right. Well, let me add in here a little bit that I think Jalen Ramsey would be a good addition to the Detroit Lions. Bob Quinn has showed his ability to make that big move when he added Smax Harrison to the mix last year. So, I think he will definitely fortify the Lions' secondary quite a bit. And he, for a guy to miss a game, he had played in 131 straight games going into this, and to miss out on his first game in over 4 years. Well, obviously it wasn't quite there. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars were fortunate to win it. So let's talk about the Jags for a moment, Xavier. What are your early impressions of Gardner Minshew?
I believe he could potentially be their franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
I won't say that I'm overly impressed by what he's doing, but I'll say that he is doing the most important thing, Scott. He's winning football games. That's what this game is about. He's winning football games, and I have to say this as well. It was nice to finally see a Leonard Fournette showing yesterday. Even though the Broncos' defense has been absolutely terrible all year, I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back yesterday, what we saw Leonard Fournette go out there and do. He's a talented guy, but we didn't see that coming yesterday. But as far as Gardner Minshew goes, listen, in the first half, he looked absolutely terrible, and in the second half, he came out there and he did his job.
Well,
I believe Nick Foles could potentially end up getting Nick Foles
yeah.
with Gardner Minshew if they continue to win ball games.
Well, I'll tell you this.
This is a league that's about wins and losses.
I'll tell you this. I covered the NFL draft this year in Jacksonville. And let me tell you something, Xavier McKnight, okay? Tom Coughlin, David Caldwell, and Doug Marrone were absolutely gleaming when this guy fell into their lap. They really were. Now, let's not forget the fact that he came from Washington State and Mike worked under Mike Leach. Let's not forget the fact that he was at Alabama and got enticed by Mike Leach to go to Washington State. It's not like Washington State is on most maps to go to begin with. But Mike Leach persuaded him, you're going to go ahead and get a chance to play rather than holding clipboard in Alabama. And I've talked to Gardner before, and I'll tell you one thing, this guy's maturity level to me is off the charts. His football IQ is unbelievable. And, Nick Foles is the type of guy that he signed a 4-year deal, $88 million. I have a feeling that depending on how the rest of the season plays out, that he could end up being the backup. And I still believe that the Jaguars would certainly like to give Foles the job back. But if they're on a roll, I don't see them doing it. They're going to play it out a little bit. But this guy has become a full hero in one of the smallest NFL markets in the country. And more importantly, even ESPN went out there, Xavier, and had a feature on him. So he's caught on quick. Let's not forget the fact of the matter, he's a 6th-round pick. I mean, he was like the 176th pick overall, 178th, but he was down there. But you can find hidden gems later. And we've talked about that time and time again, Xavier, and Minshew is definitely one of those. We got about another 8 or 9 minutes to go. Were there any other storylines in the National Football League that you would like to bring to the forefront?
Well, yes, but before I touch on that, I have to say this about the Gardner Minshew Nick Foles situation.
Sure.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if this is Russell Wilson and Matt Flynn 2.0.
Oh,
it wouldn't surprise me at all.
That's a great comparison. Thanks for bringing that up. But yeah, that's what it was. Matt Flynn came in there highly heralded from the Packers. Look how that turned out. Meanwhile, Russell Wilson's taken in the 3rd round, ironically, out of Wisconsin. Prior to that, NC State, but Wisconsin. And the guy that was drafted lower ended up winning the job. So that's a great comparison. So a whole lot of people that can identify with that. So good stuff. All right, let's move on to the next storyline or two. We have about 8 more minutes in the program.
Well, you talked about one NFL Florida team, so I'm going to talk about another. No, I'm not talking about the Miami Dolphins. They're not worth my time. So, of course, I mean the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm very impressed with what I've seen. Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich and Todd Bowles, they clearly came in and they made a difference all the way around. I knew Jameis Winston was not a terrible quarterback, Scott. I knew that because when Lovie Smith was the head coach of the Bears, well, not the Bears, the Bucs, the one season he was there. To me, that team overachieved as a whole anyway. And you saw flashes of what Jameis Winston could potentially become. And then they decided to can Lovie Smith and replace him with Dirk Cutter. We saw how that worked out in Tampa. Are we paying attention to how that's working out in Atlanta right now? Are we paying attention to that? Because all I heard all offseason was Dirk Cutter is a huge upgrade over, and help me out, Sark. He's a huge upgrade over Steve Sarkisian. I couldn't remember his name there for a second. I'm not seeing that at all. And I never thought that this was going to work, Scott, because I remember when Dirk Cutter was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta the first time. I remember how that offense looked then. So I don't know why the Falcons even brought him back in the first place. But, I feel like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers finally did Jameis Winston a solid to at least give him a chance to look like a good NFL quarterback when they brought in Bruce Arians. And I know that Bruce Arians knows that this guy has talent, and he believes that he can bring the best out of him. And as far as I'm concerned right now, Scott, I know this is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but I don't care. With Drew Brees out right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the best team in the NFC South. Not the New Orleans Saints, not the Carolina Panthers, and definitely not the Atlanta Falcons. It's the Tampa Bay Bucs who no one expected to take this week.
Well, I mean, let's break this down a little bit. First of all, Steve Sarkisian was outright awful, okay? Whether Dirk Cutter or not was a upgrade, I don't know. Who cares? But that Falcons team, Xavier, McKnight, has not been the same since Kyle Shanahan left. Period. They haven't. And, as far as Bruce Arians, he has a track record with quarterbacks. Look what he did with Peyton Manning. I think he did a pretty good job with him. He's the reason when Chuck Pagano went down. There's a guy that should have won Coach of the Year, but I don't think they give it to an interim guy. So everybody knew what a great offensive mind Bruce Arians was. And, I think now I just am curious to see whether or not Jameis Winston can develop the consistency that he needs to take himself out of bust out of the bus discussion because I think he's very erratic or sporadic. Do you follow me? And, he has to develop a fair amount of consistency. The Buccaneers brought Bruce Arians in there with the intent to save Jameis Winston's career. That's all there is to it. Because up to then, he has not performed at the level. I think they should have kept Lovie Smith. I thought that move was way too premature anyhow to let him go. But that's for another day. So, I think that Byron Leftwich might be the guy that should be getting some praise because, Byron Leftwich was a pretty good offensive mind too, and he did all right with the Jaguars. And I think he's a guy that down the road, if he keeps up the way he's going, he could be in the discussion for a head coaching job at some point down the road. And let's not lose sight of the biggest thing here, Xavier, okay? And that's this. First of all, how many times have you had a division winner change in that division compared to other ones?
Many times.
Right. So, maybe it is the Bucs' turn. Who knows? I have no idea whether it is or not. But the way I look at it is I need more out of Jameis Winston over the course of the year for me to be sold on him. But I think it's anybody's guess. Although I will tell you this, though, Xavier, the fact that the New Orleans Saints are winning ugly with Teddy Bridgewater, you got to give them their due because everybody expected them to fall flat. And who would have thought that the New Orleans Saints defense would be instrumental in them actually winning a couple of games? And I'm talking about tough ones up in Seattle against a Cowboys team that was expected to go ahead and put on an offensive show. Now, I do want to mention one thing about Sammy Watkins. You are right. I guess Sammy Watkins is the type of guy who flourishes when you have that primary receiver, so he's a secondary target instead of being the primary target. So there has been a fair amount of inconsistency there. So, who knows? I mean, there are lots of storylines that'll develop over the next so many weeks. But I got to tell you, I hope Vontaze Burfict does get blackballed from the league. I really do. Doesn't deserve to be in it. And the fact that the guy didn't show any remorse at all and is laughing about it, to me, is exactly why he got booted for the rest of the year. And I hope that the playing time will be something that changes around, but I'm not sure that it really will. If he hadn't figured it out by now, what makes you think he's going to figure it out at all? I don't know. You tell me.
No, I don't believe Vontaze Burfict is ever going to get it figured out. I believe that should be the last time we see him. Because the last thing we need is to have something very traumatic and catastrophic happen on an NFL field because a guy is out of control and he's selfish and he only cares about himself and doesn't care about the other fellow players around him. Let's get one thing straight about the NFL before we go, Scott. They play a violent game. It doesn't mean that they necessarily want to go out there and intentionally be inadvertently violent towards each other in ways that can be avoided.
I agree. But I still wish we were in the 70s. That way a guy like Dick Butkus can beat the living daylights out of Burfict. I think some of these guys need to get their behinds kicked in a big way. I really do. And I hope and pray, and I hate to wish injury on anybody, but if he does come back, that maybe that one chop block that was a cheap shot does inflict a little injury for a guy that definitely deserves it. I mean, you hate to wish injury on anybody, but if I were going to inflict injury on anybody, the two guys I would love to see get nailed would be Richie Incognito and Vontaze Burfict. So, well, Xavier, what do you think of our first act here, buddy?
We definitely had a great fun time here tonight.
Yeah, well, get used to it, man, because you and I are going to take this show to lots of levels. And, we'll continue to do other programs on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network, as we've always talked about. But you and I have been long overdue to have a show. And now I definitely believe that as we continue to research topics in and out of the sports world, that we'll definitely have a lot of fun. So we're going to be all over the news and sports world, and, we're going to have some great topics. So any final thoughts, Xavier McKnight?
Glad to be here, ready to keep it rolling. Guys, stay locked and loaded. The real is rare is coming for you. Just hope you're ready for the real and the rare.
Me? Are you asking me if I'm ready for the real and rare? Who are you talking to?
I'm saying that to our audience.
Oh, okay, good.